Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Ennis. I'm the director of the Upper Saddle River Library, and I am co-chair of the LAMP committee with Tara. And Tara, you can go ahead and.
Good morning, everyone. So as Catherine said, we're co-chairs of the LAMP committee. I'm the director at the Johnson Public Library in Hackensack. We want to welcome everyone to What is Your Career Path? This is a really nice, informal way to get to kind of hear the stories of other people in library land and how they got to where they are professionally. They're going to answer some questions individually, and then we'll also open up the floor to questions that can be answered by any of our panelists. I do want to thank our panelists so much for being here with us today. They're taking a big chunk out of their morning to speak with all of you about their individual journeys to where they're at, what challenges they've faced, maybe general advice they have for people. They all have different stories, and I think it's going to be really interesting to hear from all of them. I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, we did receive some questions in advance. We will ask those after our general questions. But if you're thinking of a question that you haven't submitted ahead of time, or if during the conversation you think of something either for the panel in general or for a specific person, please feel free to put that in the chat box. That's the easiest way for us to keep track of them. Catherine's going to be monitoring that throughout the event. 2 hours, whew, that's a long time. We're kind of out of our habit of being in long Zoom meetings since COVID, right? So we will take about a 10-minute break around 11 o'clock just to give everyone a chance to like stretch their legs, recaffeinate, use the restroom, whatever they need to do. We have a good number of attendees today, so I do think we probably are going to end close to noon, but if we wrap up early, that's okay too. I will ask our panelists if they're comfortable sharing their contact information. They can put that in the chat box if people have specific questions following up about anything that they spoke about today. And that's it. I think this is going to be a really fun morning, and I thank all of you for joining us. So I'm going to start by introducing our panelists one at a time, and they're going to just say a quick few words about themselves, and then we'll get into our general questions. So I'm going to choose this wonderful person because he was the first one to sign on with us this morning. So Leo, if you don't mind introducing yourself
Sure.
and just saying a few words about yourself. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Leo Bellino. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm the director of the North Arlington Public Library. I'm going to be here 10 years as of next year, and I'm also on the LAMP committee.
Leo, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing more from you. Leo has a really interesting career history that I think may surprise some of you, so we can't wait to hear more about that. I'm going to pick on one of my really great friends, Perinda, next. Perinda, if you don't mind introducing yourselves to everyone. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Perinda this time, the library director at the Demarest Public Library. This is my 5th year being a library director of this wonderful, small, tiny library. And I'm also the member of the LAMP committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Jessica, who a little bit different, coming from an academic library. So Jessica, if you don't mind introducing yourself. Thank you so much.
My name is Jessica Keebler. I am an instructional services librarian at Pace University in Westchester, New York. I've been at Pace for a little over 5 years now. This is my 3rd full-time job in libraries in like the past 12 years or so. And while I've interned at public libraries, all of my full-time work has been in academic. So that's really my wheelhouse. But I did work in New Jersey academic libraries before I hopped over to New York. So I'm kind of familiar with the New Jersey library scene.
Very cool, Jessica. Thank you. And totally different sort of library experience. We're going to hear next from our final, last but not least, panelist, Brianne, please.
Hello, everybody. I am a completely different librarian. I work in a corporate setting. I'm a senior information specialist at Medtronic, which is a medical device company. I work on literature searching for their for their medical products, and I help submit regulatory filings to the FDA.
Wow. Very different.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's great to meet you, and we look forward to hearing more from you. So we're going to jump right into these general questions. I'm going to ask you guys to answer them in the order that you just spoke in, if that's okay. So we'll go Leo, Perinda, Jessica, and Brianne. I'm pointing as if everyone can see what order you are in my screen. I apologize. So first question is, did you always envision yourself working in a library or in a library field? So Leo, you can take it away.
I never started out as a young adult thinking I would ever work in a library out of high school. That was not the plan. When you graduate high school, everybody says, well, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? I really had no idea. I knew I liked his art. So I went to School of Visual Arts for about a year. And then right out of School of Visual Arts, I realized that I fell in love with an art history class that I took. So then I decided to go to Jersey City University and start a double major in history and secondary education. Would have potentially made me a high school history teacher. And then, like a typical young person, after 3 years, I decided that it wasn't going fast enough and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I dropped out and I decided to go to cosmetology school and get my cosmetology license. So there's no nation at that point that I even thought that I would be in a library.
Great. See, I told you guys Leo had a little twist in his story that would interest everyone. So we're going to get more into your educational background and things in the next round of questions. But thank you, Leo. That was really
No problem.
interesting. Okay, so Perinda, did you always envision yourself working in a library?
I actually started out my career as a high school teacher back in India. So this is actually my second career choice. So I had my bachelor's and master's from literature, excuse me, and my teaching background certification from India. And when I moved back in 2008 to this country, I substituted, I had my license evaluated, but I was not enjoying working in schools because I used to teach high school kids, and here I was given elementary. So I decided to go back to school, but I wanted something where I could still work with the public. And that's how I became a librarian. I actually substituted, did a year and a half in a public school as a media specialist. And eventually I felt that I think I'm better fit for a public library. And then I started as an information services librarian, and 5 years working as a full-time librarian, I moved up to be a director at the Demarest Library.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story, Perinda. And I think it'll be especially interesting for people to hear about how you not only changed careers, but you are a new American. And that's a very unique story to have a different educational background and come here and have to like totally pivot, right? Based on different factors. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Same question to Jessica. Did you always envision yourself working in a library?
No, so similar to the previous panelists, I actually started with a different idea. So I started my college journey wanting to go into television. And then I switched after doing some internships that I really didn't like. I switched to education, and I was going to be a teacher or a reading specialist. But I really underestimated how anxious I was with kids. And that became clear once I started to look for jobs, once I started to do sub work in schools. It was really hard for me to feel responsible for other people's kids. So I was like, never mind. But I started to think about what it was that I really loved about teaching. And in the end, that was learning in general, reading and organizing information. But instead of going into like a media specialist in schools, at that point I had been working full time, and I realized that the school day schedule was a little kind of restrictive for me, and I couldn't intern in a public school because of my full-time job. And like that was part of when you get your MLS, right? You have to intern somewhere at the end. And I couldn't intern in a school while working full-time. So I just kind of said, okay, I'm just not going to do the media specialist thing. And so that led me into different types of libraries. And I think in the end, it was definitely where I was meant to be.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And last but not least, Brianne.
I had no idea where I was going to end up. I like to joke that it kind of fell into my lap. I knew what I didn't want to do. I knew that I enjoyed books and literature, and I really enjoyed finding information. I don't want to work with the public. I didn't like teaching. I didn't want to know. I knew what I didn't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up finding a really interesting internship at a pharmaceutical company during my MLIS. And that kind of led me to where I am today.
Cool. Thank you. That's great. I think we inadvertently covered our second general question, which was educational and professional background. I think y'all took us through that journey one at a time. So we're going to skip that question since we've answered that and move on to a more fun one. What is your favorite part of your job or your favorite things about your job? So Leo, we'll start with you.
There's a lot of things that I really like about my job. I love purchasing new books and getting out there and doing research on new books. I'm in this very small library. I think besides me, there's only 5 other full-time people that are here. So I love, I don't have the luxury of hiding in a secluded office like on a 3rd floor. So I say, screw it. So I go out and I do circ. I get to, meet the patrons, get to know their likes and dislikes as far as books. But I also purchase the books, so I have to do research on the new books coming out, which I really enjoy. I would say those are the 2 main things I really enjoy. I've learned to enjoy dealing with the politicians next door because I go to GIF meetings and I have to deal with them with certain things. But in the beginning, that was very hard because you really don't know anybody. And I tend to be shy when I'm not too familiar with people. So that I learned to like that. And I really love working with my board. I'm very lucky to have a very liberal board that when I want to do something, they're like, do whatever you want. They're not heavy-handed at all. And they really just support me and make me make all the decisions.
The bowl or the water so it doesn't fall.
So they really let me make all the decisions and they really support me rather than being heavy-handed and telling me what to do. So those are probably the main things I enjoy.
That's great. Thank you, Leo. Same question to Perinda.
So I actually love my job. That's how I say. It's been 5 years. I have a 1 hour, 15-minute commute one way each day. And this is the 5th year. I'm still going strong. Apart from the commute, I think I love every part about my job. The special is that I love the community and the community has been very, very responsive to all the changes that I brought in this community. And they have appreciated it. And we never had a Friends of the Library. We never had a strategic plan. This building needed a renovation. So I think every responsibility I took over was new and exciting and challenging, as you all know. So I felt I grew a lot in these 5 years. I have developed a very strong relationship. A simple example, when I walk down the road to pick up coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, who I hated, but it's the closest option, I see so many people wish me good morning and how are you doing? We love the library. So I think that makes my day every day. And being with the community, I have a fantastic staff. So I love to be their manager, but at the same time, we are all team together and we all work together to support our community.
Thank you, Perinda. I know that you've done a lot since you've been there in such a short period of time. This is an offshoot, but what's your favorite project that you've completed since you've been at Demarest?
I would say the strategic plan and forming the Friends of the Library, because I started right before the pandemic and we had no additional support for income. So we are we have a lot of cushion, we are nicely funded, but having a friends and seeing them involved in the community and, doing the fundraising, I think that's the best part of my job. And I think that's the biggest accomplishment I have.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Jessica, what are your favorite parts of your job at PACE?
Yeah, so at PACE, we don't have dedicated reference librarians. So while my title is instruction and I mostly do instruction, I also get to do reference shifts. And in the classroom, I also get to obviously work with students a lot. So my favorite thing is really just helping students understand research and information literacy. We live in such an information overloaded world, and even I get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's available to us, coming at us. So even if it's like talking to a class about finding resources for a particular assignment, I can still give them the tools to understand what's an authoritative source, what's an easy way to find quality information, so they can kind of ignore that noise and just find that information in important situations. So it's not just helping them with that assignment, it's giving them skills for like broader information finding. and it just kind of helps them organize their thoughts. And at the same time, I just love being an ambassador to the idea of libraries in our community, right? Like, these students are coming to college as a broad place, and libraries are just a part of that bigger community, which is a little bit different than public libraries. So, I hope that our students who have had bad library experiences in the past, or maybe no library experiences, there's getting rid of a lot of high school and elementary libraries. So some of our students are coming with no library background. And I just hope to kind of give them good experiences, that libraries are important to communities, and that they can go forward with that perspective and maybe go out and get a public library card wherever they end up.
That's great. And you make an important point that you may be framing for the first time, or at least reframing what an idea of a library is to these students, right? And it's going to set up their impression of a library now for the rest of their professional life and maybe personal life. So it's more than just providing them with resources, right? It's really giving them this new concept of what a library could be to them. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Brianne, I'm really interested to hear from you, because I don't really, I feel like I'm not smart enough to understand your job. So if you could share with us what the most fun parts or the most enjoyable things about your job are, we'd love to hear about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Actually, it quite aligns with what Jessica said. I may not work with the public, but I do work with a huge company. I work with clients as in other employees of my company, from all around the world. We deal with people from China or Italy or India, every day almost. So it's almost like teaching people a new version of a library almost every day. And I love the diversity of what I do. I'm never bored, which I think is it's something unique to my position, because in a corporate environment, you do find that a lot of it is the same thing every day. It gets monotonous, but not from my viewpoint. I can have my basic searching that I do every day, or I have like this way out of left field request for our legal department, who needs to know if a certain person was at a certain famous hotel on a certain day. Like, the craziest things come up, and it's always something that you don't expect. I also enjoy hearing what impact I have on people's workload, the amount of time that I'm able to save them because of my skills. It's a really interesting environment to be in.
Could you give us an example of like you gave us that one about the person being at a hotel. Could you just tell us about like one other really fun inquiry that you had to respond to?
I had to respond to a physician request for one of their patients, and they needed to know if being tasered would affect the disc plate they had in their back, because they were going into the police academy.
Oh, wow.
So I had to do a bunch of research on what electroshock would do to a medical device in a body. That was one of my more
Wow.
interesting ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's fascinating. All right. So not quite like being tasered at the police academy, but librarians do face challenges every day in their work, right? In different settings. You like my segue there, guys? It is almost the end of the week.
That's
Okay,
perfect.
so we're going to start again with Leo. Leo, what are some challenges that you have faced that you maybe didn't anticipate going into your position?
What I really didn't anticipate is all the housekeeping, household stuff that I have to keep up with. The light bulbs are always going out. The DPW comes, they put in 2 light bulbs, 2 more go out. We have a bathroom. Not everybody has good bathroom etiquette. And the maintenance woman is only here from 6 in the morning to 9. So if we get a clog, I got to call DPW. They don't always come on time. Sometimes I have to plunge the toilet. Then the basement leaks if there's an overflow in the bathroom. So now I'm in the basement with puddles of water everywhere. I mean, I got so educated on what an electric panel is and pipes and where the pipes go out that I'm pretty much on my way to being a plumber or an electrician at this point. So that was something that I really didn't want to deal with. I still don't want to deal with, and I had no idea that that would be a thing.
Leo, I think we could make a t-shirt for directors that says, sometimes I'm the one that has to plunge, right? And we could all wear that t-shirt in unison. I joke with people that I have a 9-year-old and a 120-year-old. So my
Yeah,
child and then this building.
it's
So
true.
solidarity.
Yes, there's always
Um,
something breaking.
that's very true. Thank you for sharing that with us. So candidly. Perinda, same question to you. What are some challenges that you may not have anticipated in your position?
So when I started here 5 years ago, I did not anticipate that there will be no bookkeeping. There will be no proper format to do checks and bills. So, that was my first week into becoming a library director. So I never anticipated that, because in library school, as you all know, we never thought about how to work with your budget and how to write checks. So fast forward, everything is in place. I have a fantastic bookkeeper, but like how Leo mentioned and Tara says, is the building issues that we run into every day. And the most frustrating part is trying to coordinate with the DPW to have them come in and take care of the problem. And then at the end of the day, be frustrated. And for me, it's finding the vendor and spending the extra money because the DPW is not willing to do their job. So that's the frustration day to day. And I think every library director will agree to this, that, since we are part of the borough or the municipal building, we have to work with them. That's the least favorite part of my job.
Thank you, Perinda. I do want to share that unlike North Arlington and Demarest, Hackensack is not a city building, so we don't get any support from the town like the DPW. We do all of our maintenance ourselves, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because we can control more of when it happens, but we're paying for all of it. So I would say, anyone who's interested in becoming a director, it's important to know that your situation may vary depending on what kind of building you're in. Like, you could have a really helpful DPW, you could have a DPW that's like sometimes helpful, or you could be on your own. It really depends on, and there's good and bad about all those arrangements, but you guys are right that the building is definitely a big part of what we're managing, right? So thank you for sharing that, Perinda. Okay, Jessica, any challenges that you may not have anticipated at your role there?
Yeah, well, definitely, thankfully, no plumbing. That is at least my responsibility in my role. But I would say the complexities of the academic system, right? Like, I always knew colleges were big and unwieldy, but it can be hard to come into a new job and, as this new person, see the issues that are there that maybe people who have been there a long time haven't addressed or don't see, and to be just excited to try to change them. And but then realize that like metaphorical boulder is so much bigger than you think it is, or just way more embedded than you thought. It's really like moving a cruise ship to change, big institutions. And it takes patience to accept that that's going to take time. And maybe there's going to be staff turnover that needs to happen before that happens. And I'm sure that's similar in public libraries in a way. And you can't predict things like COVID or enrollment problems, and that always sets things back. So I think I didn't realize how long it would take sometimes to do things, right? Like, we've been working on focus groups for almost 2 years, and it just takes such a long time with the shortness of the academic schedule, right? We don't see students for, I don't know, like at least 6 months out of the year. We had to do IRB requests, things take time, and I didn't realize how long things take. And then I would also kind of say just the unpredictable societal impacts that happen on colleges. So in the last couple of years, collectively, student engagement, student motivation as a whole has sort of changed due to COVID and the overall mental issues, mental health impacts that society is going through. I think a lot of us could even say it's impacting us, right? So then imagine coming into college as an 18-year-old or even as an adult. So it's impacting how we engage with students in the classroom. So all these previous strategies on creating relationships with students, engaging them in the work that we do. I come into the classroom as we call it a one-shot. I don't have a relationship with these students, and I'm just walking into a freshman English class to say, hey, do you want to do this worksheet today? And so we have all these strategies for working with students and engaging them, but they're working less. And so our new challenge is really sort of rethinking how we engage with students. And also, generations change. I'm a millennial, but I'm working with Gen Z and soon Gen Alpha students. And so that generational difference is something that we have to keep up on.
Thank you, Jessica. And I think you brought up a really great point with your cruise ship analogy, in that It takes a long time for any large organization to shift or make any changes. It just reminds me of the fact that libraries are part of communities, regardless of the kind of library. We may be working within our own individual building, but we are part of a bigger society, whether that's a university or a municipality or a city or a county or a library system like Buckles. We're not working in a vacuum, and the work that we do affects other people, our immediate staff, our community, and then the other libraries around us and the other parts of society around us. And that is a beautiful thing about libraries, but it also means that we are dealing with outside influences, and just it's much more involved than just managing what's physically in your space around you, right? And that's something to keep in mind in this field. Thank you. Okay, moving along to Brianne, same question. I'm still blown away by what you told us in the last round, but if you could share any challenges that you maybe didn't anticipate in your work there.
Sure. Money, right? Like, you would think this big corporation has all the money in the world to support all of their department's needs, but that's just not the case, right? So a constant evolution in my department is explaining our own value. What do we bring as librarians to the company, to the setting? What do our skills do to support the company? And I'm very lucky that we do have a very understanding and absolute place in our company, but we still face cuts. We're constantly being asked, well, why? Why do we need this resource? Why do we need to spend this amount of money for something that only a handful of people use, even though it's invaluable to those handful of people? So and then on the other side, it's the clients, right? Why can't I just Google it? Why can't I run this myself? Why can't I just type these words into Google Scholar and have my own job to do it? So it's a lot of teaching other people why I'm important, which for someone who's not very good at like public speaking, this is very outside of my comfort zone, or like speaking outside of my role. I need to make sure that I'm an advocate for myself. And that was something I needed to learn.
Thanks, Brianne. I feel like that applies to all library work, right? That we are always proving our value. We're really good at doing things, but maybe not so good about bragging about all the things that we're doing, advocating for ourselves, and there's never enough money. Like, we could have so much more money and it would still never be enough money because there's so much to be done, right? So it's interesting for me to hear coming from a corporate setting, because my feeling would have been what you said at the beginning, that, oh, it's a corporation, you guys have all the money in the world, so that's a stereotype that I'm glad to have been corrected on. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. Last general question. Advice for people looking for a new career path. I'm particularly interested in hearing Leo's answer to this question. So we're going to start with you, Leo. Thank you.
My change of career and my career path was very different than what I was in at the time. So after being a working hairstylist for 21 years, I decided to just go back and finish my undergrad. I had left junior year to go to cosmetology school. So I was a licensed cosmetologist for 21 years. And when I went back to finish my undergrad, I still thought I was just going to be a college-educated hairstylist. I really did not think of changing my career at that point. But I went and finished my history degree, and I was pretty active in the history department. And I had researched so many college papers in libraries that I kind of just looked around and was like, this seems like a really nice job that I love research. I love to be surrounded by books. So I asked one of my college professors what they thought, and they thought it was a great idea. So, and then I decided to apply to get into Pratt, and I got into Pratt in the city, which worked because I was a hairstylist in Jersey City. So I could go from work to school and go from school and come back to Jersey. So while I was there, I had talked to one of my teachers and I said, how do I get in the field? And they assumed I was already a working librarian of some kind. And when they found out I wasn't, they were kind of shocked, and they said, well, that's going to be the hard part, because now you have to get your foot in the door. And that scared the crap out of me, because I was like, oh my God, I invested all this money and time. Am I going to be able to get a job? So After doing that, I graduate. I contacted the North Arlington Public Library and I said, listen, do you need a volunteer? I have this education. I really have no experience, and I thought it would be a good exchange, free work labor for experience kind of thing. So I got in like that. So my advice, and I also, before I went to library school, I didn't know what kind of librarian I wanted to be. I actually volunteered at the archive in Jersey City and worked on a few projects. So my advice would be, if you're gonna change your career, I mean, I had a pretty major change. And so I explored different things by volunteering. I would say to, like, if you're not 100% sure, try to volunteer and see what the job is all about before you jump into it.
That's great, Leo. So you started as a volunteer at North Arlington. How long until you were hired?
So while I volunteered in September, and I volunteered till December. So I was at the children's, I was still a working hairstylist, how to pay the bills, but I was here 3 days a week. I put all my clients, shoved them all into a few days.
Condense them. Yeah, smart.
I was doing it for so long. I had such a following. I can just funnel them all into a few days. So I was here 3 days a week for about 5 hours a day. And then it just so happened, and see, this is sometimes the universe, God, whatever, throws something in your lap. While I was at the children's desk, the children's librarian, who was part-time, left. So I put
Oh, wow.
So I got her job in January. I started that, but I was still a part-time librarian in the children's department and a part-time hairstylist.
Leo. Amazing.
Crazy, because it's two totally different groups of people I have to deal with. And then after doing that for 2 years, being a hairstylist and a librarian, the director was leaving. And before that, I had no aspirations of being a director. But then she said to me, the board want to know if you're interested in applying for the job. So I was like, this fell in my lap. The universe gave me this thing. I have to pursue it. But I actually asked the director, I said, Chris, between me and you, what does a director do? And she said to me, you will be a jack of all trades and a master of nothing. And that was some of the most truthful, honest that I have ever gotten. And then after the whole application process, I got the job as the director.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Never planned on being a librarian, and I certainly never planned on being a director.
So if you had to sum it up in like 2 or 3 sentences, your advice for people looking to switch careers.
I would say do it. If you're not sure exactly what you want to do, volunteer your time. And then when you're absolutely sure, just go for it and take every opportunity that's given to you. Don't pass it up.
Say a lot of yeses, right? Take whatever chances to say yes you can. Yeah.
I tried to be a yes person, because every time I said yes, although it was hard and sometimes I doubted it, it wound up turning out well in the end. So say yes.
Thanks, Leo. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that. Perinda, who I know has switched careers also, would you mind sharing your advice for folks who may be thinking of changing their career path?
So, as you all know, I started as a high school teacher. And then when I was in library school, I always wanted to be an academic librarian. So I had never thought about public libraries at that time. But while I was in my grad school, I also volunteered at the Parsippany Library where I lived at this time. I mean, I still live 10 years ago as well. And I worked on developing their website and helping with anything that I could get my hands on to see how a public library functions. And I grew up in India, so the library concept is absolutely different. It's not a place where a kid goes to after school and the books are not free. We have to pay to go read the books. So I did not have and when I used to go after school to do some work and to volunteer, I really fell in love with the library, the way people supported the community, the library staff. And then also I was still did not want to take my foot off from the schools because I was a part-time substitute in the school. And then there was a media specialist opened up and they knew I had a certification. So they offered me the job. And I absolutely did not enjoy my 1 year as being a media specialist. I'll be very honest about it. So I decided to go back to public libraries. And at that point, I was actually pregnant with my twins. I had twins, 10-year-olds. And that's when I went back part-time and worked in a public library. And eventually became a full-time information services librarian at the library before Demarest. My advice would be is that, try different places to volunteer, try different areas where you think you would do better, but don't restrict yourself. The best part about working in a public library is you can try your hands in different areas of being a librarian. You can be a programming librarian, you can be cataloging if that's something interests you. So don't restrict yourself. Even in library school, if you decide to go, take different classes. So
Sorry, okay.
That's okay. Take different classes, explore every areas of being a librarian, and I think you will find your niche, because this is the only industry where if you had a science background, you had a law background, you can actually become a librarian. So I felt that was very fascinating about being a librarian. And if you want to be a director, there's a lot of things you have to learn to do, but I think there's a specific question on that, so I'll answer that.
Thanks, Perinda. So it seems like the resounding theme so far is to take the risk, right? Volunteer and get experience wherever you can and try whatever new things are offered to you, because that's how you figure out where you're supposed to end up, right? So very cool. Jessica, same question. What's your advice to someone who may be thinking about changing their career path?
Sort of similar to what Leo and Perinda were saying, is my experience was shadowing people, which isn't like, let's say there's not a volunteer opportunity available. You can ask if professional organizations can kind of help connect you with people who you can just watch for the day to even see if you're interested in that type of librarianship. Because I had trouble getting a job in teaching, which in the end, that was what was meant to be. But I was petrified to go back and get a master's and then not be able to get a job and to not be marketable. That was a really bad experience for me. So, and I was afraid to have a job that I didn't like. Right? Like I even thought about corporate librarianship, but I was like, I don't know anything about this. So I found someone in a public library, an academic library, and a corporate library, and I shadowed them all for the day. And it really helped me to see that I really wanted it, that this was where I was meant to be, and that it was okay for me to put all my effort into this. And that there were so many different options for libraries. So shadowing people was one thing that really helped me. And if you're really interested in getting embedded in the professional community, is try attending conferences that you can afford on topics that you find interesting. There are scholarships, there's student rates, and then you can get to meet people who may know about positions coming up or volunteer opportunities, and kind of make connections with people at these professional conferences. And that was sort of the way I got my second library job, which was a move up from where I was. My first library job was in a very, very small nursing college. And I was doing a poster presentation, and I happened to meet librarians from Berkeley College, which was my last job. And they knew about an upcoming instruction position, and they told me about it. And we really kind of jived. And when the position opened, I applied, and I already had that connection. So little different than going to a conference as a newbie, but because I already had a job, but there is that possibility. And kind of similar to that, I would say, don't be afraid to keep in touch with people. I have reached out to people that I haven't seen or worked with in years, just to even give them kudos on something I saw them do, or that, I read an article that they wrote, and that's more common maybe in academic libraries, but it just really keeps that professional connection going. That was really out of my personality for a while. It kind of seems weird to reach out to people. It might feel awkward at first, but I have found that people are so happy to keep connections and to chat and to talk, and especially in library world. I don't know if that's true in other professions, but it definitely is in the library world.
Thank you. And just to follow up, I totally agree with you about attending conferences or any networking opportunities that are available to you. Everyone here knows that Buckles does member services events, and also, even if you can't attend a full conference, maybe you could just go to one day of NJLA or another smaller conference, but conferences are a great way to meet a lot of people really fast. And even if you're not necessarily thinking about pursuing a library degree right now, going to sessions may give you some direction as far as like what you may want to do. Like you'll learn about different sort of paths in librarianship. So I totally agree. That's a great point. And also just ask if you know someone who's in a job that you're interested in, just ask them what it's like, or if they have any advice for you. The directors in Buckles reach out to each other with questions all the time, and we're always really happy to share information. And I'm sure our panelists here, if you guys have questions for them after this, would be happy to answer them for you. Librarians in general love to share information. That's kind of our thing. So I would always say, it's good to just ask people if you have a question about something. It may end up leading you to a connection that leads to a new job or opportunity. So, and last but not least, same question to Brianne, advice for people looking to maybe try a new career path.
So I'm checking things off as everybody else says them on my little like note list. And a lot of it applies anywhere, right? Be versatile, be bold, say yes. I will say that marketable skills are so important, even your soft skill sets. When I started my internship at a pharma company, that was the first time I had ever set foot in a library setting. Similar to Leo, I had no experience. And that was very intimidating for me. And I needed to learn to just say yes, try something new, put myself out there. And what were my skills that would help me learn a new role? From the library and the pharma company, I actually moved to their marketing department as a reference gatekeeper for their promotional materials. I had no idea what I was doing. I just said, yes, I can figure it out. I'm a quick learner. Let's go. And that actually led to me meeting someone who owned another company who led me to Medtronic. So you just never know what's going to lead you down that path. It's uncomfortable, it's out of your comfort zone, but do it because you just don't know.
Thank you. I think that's great advice in general. And it was interesting that you crossed over into marketing, because I feel like a lot of library work is marketing, whether it's just person to person or actually doing organized marketing for your library or department. We need to really sell what we're doing, right? Because I feel like sometimes people are just not aware in various settings, like public, academic, special libraries. So those were our general questions for each panelist. There is something that Catherine and I just wanted to address quickly. When we asked for questions for people who were registering, we got a slew of questions about obtaining a library degree. What's the cheapest MLS? What's the fastest MLS? What's the best MLS? So we just wanted to say quickly that this forum isn't really the place to answer that question, but in general, if you're interested in obtaining an MLS, first of all, talk to people in your library and they may have personal recommendations for you. But the American Library Association's website has a whole search tool where you can look for library programs based on whether they're all online, partially online, in person. And I think I don't want to speak for Catherine too, but in general, find an ALA accredited program that you can afford. And that would be my advice, because of all the years I've been a librarian, no one has ever asked me where I went to library school. I'm really proud that I went to Drexel. It's a really excellent university, and it was like really hard at times, but no one's ever asked me. All that anyone cares about is that I have my professional librarian certificate and I'm a certified librarian. So my advice personally would be just find a program that works for you. Like, as far as, are you able to commute? Maybe you're not, maybe you need all online. And just find what works for you, and something that you can afford that's ALA accredited. I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, Catherine, but.
No, I mean, that's exactly what Tara said. It's no one's ever going to ask you where you went. They're just going to want to know that you went, that you graduated, that you have the skills. So find the program that is going to work for your schedule, that hopefully, works within whatever your budget is. And they're always changing. So really your best bet is, my information at this point is probably outdated from when I went, and it's, not that many years ago. So definitely check ALA, talk to the people who are around you who may have gone more recently. But it really is more what is going to work for you. Don't worry about the name of the school. It's about the schedule. It's about, the convenience for you. So that's the important part.
And make sure you apply for all scholarships that are available to you,
Yes.
including the Buckle Scholarship. You hustle for all that money you can get because most people are not in this field to become millionaires, right? So we could all use a little help obtaining an expensive graduate degree. I think it's 10 to 11. And before we jump into the questions that were submitted in advance and the chat box questions, I think this might be a nice time to take a 10-minute break to give everybody some like leg stretching and water refilling and whatever else they need to do. So I'm going to mute myself and turn off my video. We're all going to do the same for 10 minutes and we'll be back at, we'll just, Siri, I'm not talking to you right now. We'll be back at the crack of 11. If you have questions that came up during the discussion or questions you haven't submitted yet, please feel free to just put those in the chat box. We'll try to answer everybody's questions. You're welcome to ask the full panel or an individual panelist if it applies specifically to their position. So thank you guys. We'll see you back in 10 minutes at 11 o'clock. Welcome back, everyone. We have a couple more minutes.
Couple more minutes.
All right, my chimes are chiming. We're gonna get started again in 1 minute. Okay. So just a quick note, we may have people that want to ask questions anonymously. And if that is the case, feel free to message Catherine directly and she will not disclose who you are. It's either that or we don't continue with the recording for privacy's sake, but I think it's really important for anyone who may want to see these answers to be able to see them. So I think the alternative here is for them to just message you directly, Catherine, and you can ask the question or pass it along to me. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all a little good stretch break, caffeine, water, whatever you needed. Okay, so we had some questions submitted in advance. Some are for particular people, some are general. So I'm going to start with 2 general ones that Darlene actually just passed along to me. And the first one, along the same lines as we were discussing right before our break, was what is the highest title that someone can get without an MLS? I think any one of our panelists can jump in here, but I would immediately start by answering with, it depends on the type of library, the size of the library, and a few other things. But if anyone on any of our panelists want to jump in here and answer that question, it may be of particular interest to hear from Jessica, like maybe at an academic library, and same for you, Brianne.
I can start quickly. I don't know too
Thank
much
you.
about this, but I know where I am now. We had someone who was a manager in the reference department who just completed his MLS like 6 months ago. And I think in order to get that promotion from reference staff to manager, the MLS had to be in process, right? So I
Okay.
think, at least from my experience, if it would be any type of managerial position, or an instruction position, that would need to be, there would need to be a master's degree there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to?
I can jump on this one. So if you have an MLIS, you can go as far as being a director. But if you decide not to pursue library school, then there is only so much you can go. Like you can be head of circulation. You start as a part-time circulation assistant, and then eventually, if you stay longer, you move up to become a full-time, and then eventually become the head of circulation. I have a recent example. My youth services librarian was a programming outreach library associate until last year, and she's almost finishing up her master's degree, so she got promoted, and she also has a teaching background, so she's promoted, and now she's our youth services associate. And next year, when she finishes her degree, I believe in winter, she will be being paid as a full-time librarian rate versus the associate, which she's getting paid right now. So it's essentially, you have to decide that financially as well as in your career, how far you want to go. And if you aspire to be a director, as I was 10 years ago, then you need your master's degree, and that will bring you to become a director at some point in your career.
Thank you, Prinda. I did want to just mention too, in larger public libraries, it may be a little different. You could be an HR staff person, you could be head of marketing or security or maintenance. There's even an assistant director in Buckles who doesn't have an MLS. So like I said, I think it really depends on the size of the library too. But there is a lot you can do without an MLS degree, but you absolutely need it to be a director.
And also, I
Brianne,
think
did
it
you?
varies by state, sorry.
Yes,
when
that's
I
true.
moved to New York, like, I don't think you need the professional state certificate that New Jersey requires. So
Okay.
check wherever you might be moving and where you want to stay, just check the state requirements.
Thank you. That's good advice too. Brianne, did you want to chime in too?
Sure. Excuse me. Unfortunately, for like a corporate setting, for what I do, you do need your MLIS or an equivalent degree because we do searching that's so important for like regulatory notified
Mhm.
bodies. It requires us to have that certification.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. Okay, and along the same lines, next question was, do you think the library world will follow suit with other careers where experience can be substituted for a degree? This is a hot topic, I think. I'll say this. There was a library associate who worked with me at the Richmond Public Library who had been there for 45 years, who knew more about the archival resources at Richmond Public Library than anyone. And she was not a librarian. Her name's Lynn. She's happily retired now, but Lynn knew more about our clippings folders and all of that local history than any librarian. Do I think there should have been a path for Lynn to obtain librarianship without, at her age, going back to library school? Absolutely, I believe that. And I think this is an opinion question. Do I think it will happen? I don't see it happening anytime soon, especially because they do want that professional certification. You have to, pay Thomas Edison whatever amount of money to look at your transcript and give you a certificate to become a professional librarian. So I don't see it happening anytime soon, but I do wish there were other ways for people to become librarians because I know that the cost of that degree is a barrier to a lot of really smart and talented people. But that's just my opinion. But I would love to hear what our panelists think about that question. No, I know it's a
I'll jump.
tricky one. Go
I'll
ahead,
jump in
Leo.
and say, I have to agree with you. I have an accounts payable and receivable person here that's been here for over 30 years. And when I took over as the director, she knew where all the bodies were buried. Like I took over and I had a virus loaded computer. In fact, you'll laugh when I tell you this, but there was the time when we used to do the Buckles calendar for the year physically.
Uh-huh.
And
I
she
remember.
slammed it on my desk and said, "Here, you have to do this." I mean, she was here so long, she could, and they allowed her. The board made her the interim director when
Right.
we're between directors. So it's absolutely, like you said, Tara, it's absolutely possible to be a great director through experience. But again, I have to agree with you. That piece of paper means something.
Yeah. Thank you, Leo. And there is an argument to be made for the ethics and mechanics and information standards that professional librarians need to know. But I feel like it's a shame that there's not a way to do that through work experience or something
Yeah.
else. But anyway, I don't know if any of our other panelists want to chime in.
The
If
one thing I would
not,
just say would
Mhm.
be, just at a time that we're in right now, where there is such a tax on expertise
yeah,
and scholarship, I think there is something to, and libraries in general. And, so I think there is something to say, to have that piece of paper, to stamp ourselves as professionals in information, that we are up there with academics.
yeah,
And that you can gain that with experience. And I do agree that there should be a path that way. And I wish that the MLS path was easier. I think it should be. But I do think that in this time of like just attacks on libraries and expertise and scholarship, we really do need to stamp ourselves that way.
as professionals. Yes,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
understand. Thank you. Brianne, you got your very own question. Are you ready? Do you have any advice on how to obtain an internship with your or any large pharmaceutical company? Any resources for corporate or law librarian internships?
Oh gosh, that's heavy.
It's a big question.
It is. I will say it took me 6 years for Medtronic to hire me. I was a consultant through another company that worked for them. And it took me 6 years to prove my value for them to be like, all right, I guess we'll pay you and you can come on board. So it's unfortunately not easy. A lot of the internships are through dedicated programs. So through MLIS schools, ALA. There was a Special Libraries Association similar to ALA, but they actually just dissolved this year after 116 years.
Yeah.
Whether ALA will include a faction of that going forward, I'm not sure. My biggest advice would be to learn the terminology that corporations used to kind of code their librarians. Information specialist, competitive intelligence, knowledge management, resource specialists, data analysis. Like there's so many different ways that they could put out a librarian type position that you just need to be familiar with those terms.
That's really good advice, to speak the language of the people you want to impress, right? Yeah. And that's good advice for anything. Like if you're applying for a job, do research on that organization, go look at their website, read their minutes, read their strategic plan, or read about the company, their mission statement, what initiatives they've taken on. It's going to give you a big leg up. Thank you. We have I'm sorry.
I just want to chime in. When I was in my library school, I interned at the Montclair State University. So it's also very important that if you're in library school, you can reach out to your program director and express your interest, and they would be able to line you up with some internships, and that would be super helpful as compared to independently going. And again, networking, knowing the right people. My husband works in the pharma industry, so I was actually going to be able to spend a day at his work where the librarian showed me if you want to become a special librarian. So any contacts, any resources you could use while you are in library school, that would be very helpful to get the hands-on experience.
That's really good advice, Perinda. Thank you. And yes, let the people that you're paying all that money for that degree, let them help you find internships and make connections for you for sure. Okay, next question from our chat box. As someone who knows that library work is their preferred career path, and as someone who's young and yet to start her MLS, oh, I remember those days so long ago. What do you guys recommend for getting a start with experience? I know Leo spoke to this a little bit, answering his various questions, but if anyone wants to jump in.
I'll just speak really quickly for academic libraries. I think it's very hard because we have more of the job requirements. You know, if you wanted to get a position like at our circulation desk, you know, I think some of our students who are interested in library work are starting out as just pages, or, you know, people who work with the circulation staff. But otherwise it might be better to kind of go the public library route, whether that's volunteering or getting a part-time job in the public library. And that was where I started even before jumping into academics.
Thank you. That's good advice, Jessica.
Yeah, I would say starting as a volunteer would be the best if you are not already, you know, hired by a library. But if you're working in a library presently, maybe just a page, or maybe, you know, a part-time library assistant, very, very part-time. Look at your area of interest and maybe reach out to your supervisor or maybe even the director if it's a small library and express your interest that this is the area I would like to. And you might not get paid, but you might get the experience. And that would help you decide that if you want to become a, you know, a youth services librarian, if you're interested in cataloging. My cataloger is not a library graduate, but she does a fantastic job because she started as a page and she was very interested in cataloging. And I got her some training from Buckles. And today she's our part-time cataloger, you know, who catalogs 20 hours a week. So it essentially depends on what you want to do. And you have to carve your own way and be bold enough to ask your supervisors and take on extra work. That's how you get up in your ladder.
Brenda, I want to agree with you in that, at least as a director for entry-level positions, it's great to see library experience, but if people have experience working with people like retail or food service, gosh, if you can do those jobs, you can do anything. Those jobs are really tough. Like Leo had all of his customer service experience. Like, what's more personal than somebody's hair and like appearance, you know what I mean? And he's like, yep.
Yeah, and you know, when I used to go on my job interviews, that was my calling card. I would be like, the one thing you're not going to get from your average MLS person is customer service. I can talk to people. And I still do that here. I go out, I chat with the patrons, I find out what they like, what's going on in their lives, that's like a personal touch.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to add about the volunteering. I would also like to tell people, every library is different, every staff is different. And if you go to a library and don't like how your experience is there, it's going to be different at a different library. So,
That's very true. Mhm.
don't judge all libraries and all children's librarian desks or whatever by just one library.
That's great advice. But yeah, I was just saying, like, if I think a lot of times, especially for entry level positions, a lot of people will be willing to give you a chance, even if you don't have library experience, if you're the right person. Because if you have the right attitude and mindset, that's something that can't be taught. Like Brianne was talking about soft skills earlier. Those skills are really important. And I think a lot of library managers or directors would be willing to give the right person a chance, especially like at a cert position or any entry level position. And then also like just if there's an opportunity to take on a project or to do more beyond your scope of work, like Corinda was saying, just do it. It's like free experience and more resume building. Like you may find that you really enjoy doing that thing that you didn't think you would enjoy doing. And it's great to kind of figure out how you want to move forward from there. So great. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to move on to the next question. This was submitted in advance. I have a bachelor's degree in communications, but just started working at the circulation desk about 9 months ago. What kind of career paths might you recommend for me, specifically those that won't require me to return to school? Thanks. Anyone want to chime in to respond to that question? I think we talked about it a little bit just now. There's a lot you can do without a degree.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Brenda.
I can chime in. So if you don't want to go to library school, circulation desk is a good job to start with. But like I mentioned before, that if you can develop strong relationship with the team, especially your direct supervisor, if you're working in a big library, or small library would be a director, and having a one-on-one meeting with her and talking to her that I want to take on more projects and I just don't want to do the circulation desk, and tell me how I can help you, because you can run a program, you can help with youth services, you can learn the cataloging job. You won't be paid as a librarian paid, but you definitely will be paid, and eventually you could get a full-time job. So it's all about how you approach your manager and how willing you are to take on extra responsibility. You might not get paid, but this extra volunteer work, this extra step would bring you a long way. That's how I've grown in my career. So that's what always I tell everyone who's looking to move up in their career.
That's great, Brenda. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to chime in on that question? Okay, thank you. How can a solo librarian, as if you're in a department of one, with no underlings, that's their word, not mine, underlings, gain supervisory experience that will help them move up a level? I don't mind answering. Go ahead.
I
Yes.
can speak to that. That was my first job out of library school. A very small college in Jersey took a chance on me as a new graduate. Although I honestly think that they probably wanted someone who didn't know anything about libraries, and like that they didn't know anything about libraries and they were cool with me not knowing a lot, right? So that like I couldn't potentially point out things that they did wrong. So I walked into a room with 50 boxes of nursing books, empty shelves, and an empty ILS that had been, it was all picked out by a seasoned librarian, but she couldn't take on the full job. So she kind of like set them up and then walked away, and I walked in, and it was a really fun experience, especially as my first thing out of library school. And just goes back to that idea of just say yes, right? Like that was my stepping stone to doing a poster presentation, to meeting my Berkeley colleagues who I just had lunch with, 2 days ago, even though we haven't worked together in 6 years. You build these relationships cumulatively. But to the question, is there an opportunity to have interns or unpaid volunteers? Right. That's at least something. I had students who helped me shelve books or label books, and I had to work around their schedule. I didn't have to deal with payroll, but I was kind of managing people and their schedule and projects. And as a solo librarian, you are the de facto manager of your department. So your communication with other managers can be used as examples of how you might engage with future employees in the job. Or have you handled projects that required working with multiple people? Probably. So that's a way to really highlight your communication skills and how you might communicate with underlings. I love that term.
Thanks, Jessica. I was going to say too, exactly what you did. Interns, volunteers, project management, join a Buckles committee. I do want to mention the supervisory training course has applications open right now. It's run by the LAMP committee. And we have space for 20 or 25 people, and we have only, I don't know, less than half that many applicants so far. So there's still a good chance of being selected if that's something you're interested in. And yeah, like just there are other experiences other than directly supervising someone that can help you become a manager for sure. Anyone else want to chime into that?
I
can
speak. As part of my job in the marketing department, I was the only person working in a library role. And it was important for me to document my value and my processing for others to know what I was doing. So how much work was I actually doing? And a lot of that boils down to knowledge sharing too. Be good at shouting about how good you are doing at your job, especially if you're only a department of one, because then others know that they can count on you to get that job done.
That's really important. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, speaking of management, we have another question. How can people who are interested in management, but their current position doesn't involve things like our favorite things, directors get ready, municipal funding, payroll, or other director-related tasks, learn what they need to know to take on that kind of role?
I can start. So my first and most important advice would be is that keep your eyes and ears open, look around, see where an extra help is needed, and reach out to your supervisor. In this case, if you want to move up to become a director, then reach out to your director. I would start with my example. When I was working as an information services librarian at my previous job, technology is something that, it might take up all day, and sometimes you have nothing to do. And I was super bored at my job, and I was like, okay, there's nothing more going on. Now, what am I supposed to do? So I sat down with my director and I said that, I need some challenges. Otherwise, I won't be able to do this job. And at my that library, there were no EDU programming. There were just very few of those. And I came up with few ideas, and I told my director, these are the programs I would like to try. And she said, there's no money. If you can do it for free, absolutely go ahead and do it. And that's how I started doing programming. By the time I left my library in 2019, my programs had attendance of 45 to 50 people, where there was zero attendance. And when I was interviewed for this position at the board, that was one of the main reasons they hired me, though I did not have a director experience, is that I was able to think outside the box and I brought different things to the table, just not being the director. Because if you're not a director, you don't know how to write checks and bills, you don't know the budget management, but you can learn from your job. But you have to think outside the box, and you have to be somebody where people would look at you and say, yes, so she's just a librarian, she has so much more experience. So if you're willing to take that extra mile, I had little kids at that time, I've worked extra hours to do a program independently and show that I'm capable to do that, because it was a medium library, but I didn't have any direct supervision. So there was no way to grow in that position unless the director retired, and she was fairly young. So I had my career path that I would want to move up in my position, and that's what I did.
Super smart, Perinda. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I jump in?
Yes, Leo, please.
I would say if you're a director, and I have my youth service librarian here, when she was hired, she expressed interest in potentially pursuing a directorship at some point. And she told me, so every time I do something that's a director specific task, I include her in on it and show her and say, look, this is what I deal with, whether it's municipal funding or budget or drama with the municipality. I pull her in and I say, this is what you might come across. So if you're interested, I say, tell your director that you're interested, and hopefully you have a director that's willing to share their experience with you, without scaring you off the idea of being a director, because that happens too.
Thanks, Leo.
I just wanted to add one, sorry, Dara. The only two things that what you would also, I recommend doing is I was an NJLA emerging leader 10 years ago at that really helped me. And if you have not signed up for the buckle supervisory training, I had attending one of those as director, and there was a nice enthusiastic group and they wanted to move up in their career and they had some great questions, and the presenter is amazing with so much experience. So that would also answer so many of your questions and maybe make you ready. Because when I finished my emerging leaders training 10 years ago, when I was not even a full-time librarian, I knew that at some point in my career, I want to become a director. So those two, any one of those you pick are very essential for you to grow in your career.
Thank you.
Can I add
wanna
one, can I add one more
Oh,
thing?
yes, please.
Also, my youth service librarian is a very competent, intelligent woman. I had a family emergency on the night of the board meeting, and she ran the board meeting for me. So that was a great introduction to part of what we do as directors. And if she ever went for a director's job, I would definitely, her experience helping me when I needed it and including her in would definitely get her a letter of recommendation from me.
Leo, you brought up what I was going to say, and that's attend a board meeting. Talk to your director and say, I want to observe a board meeting. I am more than happy, like personally, to go over the budget, how I write the agenda, how I do all the reports with anyone on the staff. I mean, people may not have any interest in seeing that, but if they may want to become a director, that's stuff that I wish my previous directors had shown me. And sometimes just reading board minutes and attending a meeting can teach you so much about like the little mechanics of the job. Anyone else?
I mean, it might seem obvious, but like just looking at like LinkedIn learning courses that your library might offer. Like I just became trustee at my local public library. I feel a little bit out of my sorts with all the budget and stuff like that because academic library, right? Not the thing I deal with.
Different.
But I'm thinking of like taking some online courses or something that might be presented by like the library consortium, just so I can understand a little bit more. I mean, like I always sit with the board members, but like I'm new to them. So coming into a conversation, as we talked about before, knowing the jargon and knowing a little bit is helpful.
That's a great point. And congrats on becoming a trustee. All right. Last question that I have that was pre-submitted. Do you have any information about relocating for a new position? I did it, but I'm going to see if anybody else wants to speak on it first. Okay, so I'll speak on it then. I worked in a Buckles library or a few Buckles libraries for over a decade and then had like a quarter life crisis and moved to Richmond, Virginia. And I lived there for 6 years. And then I moved back here for this position in Hackensack. And I think this question is asking about like, would your library help pay to relocate you? Or the answer is no. I had to pay for everything myself. I had to come up for 2 in-person interviews and paid for my own hotel, my own travel without even with just an interview on the plate. And then when I relocated, that was 100% on me. So I guess what I'd keep in mind is make sure what they're offering you makes sense if you're going to relocate for a new position. It did for me, but everyone's situation varies, and that's definitely something to consider. Usually public libraries can't afford to relocate someone. Special libraries, academic libraries, private libraries may be different, but I would not expect a public library to help you relocate. That's just in my experience. Anyone else?
I'll jump in. I was interviewing for youth services librarian last year, and I had 2 out-of-state people who had applied for it. One of them was very competent and had gone to the 3rd round. But before I would make an offer to her, I had an interview where I discussed with her that moving from Pittsburgh to New Jersey is going to be a big change and big difference for you because the standard of living. So you have to consider all the factors if you're deciding to move states. Is this something you will be able to sustain for a longer time? Is this what you want in your career? If you are changing careers and moving to become a librarian, you definitely want to first try it in your own state or the town where you live. And if that's something you really like, then you should make the move because moving is not easy and it's very expensive, especially when you're moving to New Jersey. I'm sure you all agree with that.
Yeah. Yes, and with a child, it made it even more interesting. I'm just going to do one last ask. Does anyone have any final questions that they want to throw into the chat box here? No? All right, so I'm gonna go through our panelists one last time and ask them for any final words of wisdom, any lasting thoughts they want to leave with us before we end our session today. So Leo, we'll start with you.
I would just say if you know, you want to change your career, you should look around and, you know, if you have to do a pro and con list, you know, and try to be methodical with your planning and be absolutely sure what direction you want to go in. And then once you go there, just go for it, you know. Say yes a lot and, you know, just be brave. And I personally feel like everything will work out.
Thanks, Leo. That was a very positive little nugget to leave us with the end of our session today. I appreciate that. Perinda, any last words from you?
I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. I'll put my email address in the chat box, but I would say nothing is impossible to achieve if you put your mind and heart to it. I think you can become a future library director with the right amount of education and experience. So don't hesitate to try and ask your peers, your supervisors, and I think you will achieve what you have expected for yourself in life. So good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Perinda. Jessica, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would say definitely feel free to reach out if you're interested in academic libraries and have any questions on that. Two things I would say is kind of, we talked about it a little bit, but just to really bring it home is to always try to frame the experience you've had in a way to help show yourself as valuable in libraries. You know, I worked at an electronic medical records company, but I was a project manager. Project management is very easy to shift over to libraries in a lot of ways. I even worked at a furniture company, but I was dealing with like big Excel files, but are kind of like MARC records, right? So you can find ways to match it over. It may not always work, right? Because in my team, we need someone who has taught before, right? So it's not always going to be possible, but in a lot of ways it can. And more generally, I would say just be yourself in interviews. It doesn't do anybody any favors to come in and act like who you think the library wants you to be, because then you get there and there's a mismatch between yourself and the environment. So just be who you are and answer all the questions as you normally would, and you'll find the place where you're meant to be.
Thank you, Jessica. And to follow up with that, don't forget when you're in an interview, you need to make sure it's a good fit for you too.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, it's not just you selling yourself. You need to make sure this organization is a place where you're really going to thrive and not just like be clinging to the edge, you know? So, last but not least, Brianne, any final thoughts for our folks here today?
Sure. I think double everything Jessica said. Be willing to take your skills and wedge them into what you think would work for a new position. Be a chameleon, be genuine, and be able to try different things and be brave about it.
Thank you. I see that some of our panelists have already included their contact information in the chat box. Leo and Brianne, if you're comfortable sharing yours too, and you wouldn't mind throwing that in there, we'd appreciate it. Last call for any final questions. I did see a question about the Emerging Leaders Program. It's usually every 2 years. So I think you responded already, Perinda, because you're so quick and amazing, and said the next one's probably going to be in 2027 for NJLA. But that supervisory training course, the application is open now to people in Buckles, and that's offered every year. Any final thoughts from you, Catherine, before we say goodbye to folks today?
No, I just want to thank our panelists again for joining us. Thank everybody who came and attended. Hopefully you got some really good information. You know, if you have any questions, either specifically for our panelists, they put their contact information in the chat. If you have any questions, you know, you can always reach out to LAMP, Tara, myself, or any of our members. We're always happy to help. And I think, you know, we touched upon it in this session already, but, you know, I think librarians as a whole, we're always willing to help each other and share information. So never be afraid to, ask questions,
Mhm.
and get advice and information from all of us. So.
Yes, I would say in general, every member of the LAMP committee would be more than happy to help you with whatever they are able to. And if we can't help you ourselves, we'll pass you along to the right person. But to echo what Catherine said, thank you so much to our panelists. We can give them all a little virtual round of applause. You guys did an awesome job today. We really appreciate you sharing your stories and insight with everyone. Oh, thank you. I see all the clapping emojis. That makes me so happy. I'm going to ask our panelists and Catherine to just stay on along with Darlene for a moment after we ooh, I think someone accidentally shared their screen with us.
Yes, they did.
And just ask our panelists and Darlene to stay on for an extra moment. And everyone else, you are free to go. Please make sure you let folks in your library know that this meeting was recorded and will be shared. So if they weren't able to attend today, they're welcome to watch it later on. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.